Well, howdy doody, sociologists. I hope you're enjoying getting stuck into the fourth unit for the year, social movements. Here is lesson number dos. We've got three learning goals today. You're going to know why the Dakota pipeline is controversial. So this is one of the case studies that we're going to be looking at. We're going to do the Dakota pipeline that's in the book, and we're going to pick our own as well. You're going to be able to conduct a sheep analysis, social, cultural, historical, environmental, economic, political, technological. Now say that to yourself in your head so you remember what they are. And you're going to know some sociology keywords because we're going to do that quizlet again for homies. Homework. Okay, let's go back to the Dakota pipeline, shall we? So, it was the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and others, but it was them to start with because the pipeline was slated to go through their land that protested against it, and others. It became quite a big issue in the States. It was going to pollute their drinking water, and it was going to damage some sacred burial sites. But that's fine for mining companies in Australia to do. Gross. So got some images from the protests to show you here. So this is Stand with Standing Rock Sioux, water is life. Yeah, because the fear was if this pipeline crosses one of their a lot of their water sources, including the Mississippi, and if any damage occurred to the pipeline and oil leaked into one of those water sources, that would poison their water, which would be no good. Defend the sacred. I thought they said defend the scared to start with. So there you go. Good to see a lot of female and children protesters out. And so, as you'll find out later on, environmental movements are quite big on imagery. So a lot of their protests are quite artistic. There's a lot of narrative there. They're fun to be in. Here's someone holding something that says, "Honour our treaties." Obviously, there were treaties made between early settlers in North America and the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, which they believe will be broken if this pipeline goes through their land. Respect existence or expect resistance. That's from Extinction Rebellion, I believe. Water is life. Sorry about the dodgy quality of those images. They're out the front of the White House. Nice. You know the White House never used to have a fence. Now it's got about 7. That's lovely. We are protectors, not protesters. So they feel that they are protecting the sacred sites of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and the water sources that the pipeline is going to crisscross. If you can see there, keep it in the ground. Yeah. This is a common thing that you'll see in environmental protests, particularly to do with climate change. The idea being, if we burnt all the fossil fuel that is on Earth, then we would have catastrophic climate change. So even though it would go against normal economics, all of that, those fossil fuels need to be left in the ground and not burnt. 18 million people downstream. So yeah, there's that many people who rely on the water sources that could get damaged if this pipeline burst. Hashtag no DAPL. That's Dakota Access Pipeline something. What does that stand for? I don't know. You can find out. Some more people protesting. This is actually out on the site rather than in the city. You can see some First Nations people there. An upside down US flag. That means they're not happy. And then here we see now, what's interesting about modern social movements is because everybody has a camera and a video camera in their pocket, so many more things are able to be recorded that weren't in the past. If you remember from the Black Lives Matter movement, George Floyd, it wasn't the police that recorded his murder, it was a member of the public who was sitting there filming the entire thing with a mobile phone. So here at the North Dakota pipeline, the Dakota pipeline protesters were able to record everything that went on in response to their protests. Now, of course, the pipeline is built on private land, so the protesters were breaking the law by being on this private property. Of course, you know, to say a protest is breaking the law is kind of against the point. Usually protests are protesting against some kind of law or some kind of institution. Here you can see the people responding to the protesters by wetting them with water cannons. Right, let's watch a video. This is from PBS, which is kind of like the SBS or ABC in the US. It's about the Dakota pipeline. It's about how the pipeline was nearing completion.
The controversial Dakota Access Pipeline is designed to carry North Dakota oil through the Dakotas and Iowa to an existing pipeline in Illinois. Following months of protests, the Obama administration stopped the project, but President Trump has put it back on track. The public media collaboration Inside Energy, in partnership with Rocky Mountain Public Media, has produced a documentary called Beyond Standing Rock about what led to the protests and presidential actions. Reporter Lee Patterson has this excerpt from the documentary.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom! It is our duty to win! It is our duty to win!
The protesters came from all over the country to fight the Dakota Access Pipeline. For many, this is a fight over clean water. For others, it's a fight against big oil and climate change. For the Standing Rock Sioux, it's a fight for control.
Tribes are flexing their muscle. They are sovereign nations, and they have the ability to get engaged.
Misinformation, emotion, and confusion surrounded these protests. More than 600 protesters have been arrested.
It's kind of turned, unfortunately, into a kind of a small, truly peaceful protest, Native American movement into a big white hippie Burning Man on the plains of North Dakota in the middle of winter.
Sometimes people just say, like, they're opposed to pipeline development and they're opposed to pipelines. Well, that's fine, and they're entitled to their opinion, but pipeline development is legally permissible in North Dakota, and we're obligated to enforce the laws. So when a company meets the conditions set by law for a permit, they receive one.
The standoff here was brought on by a convergence of issues: tribal sovereignty, energy infrastructure, environmental activism, and federal law.
We're a sovereign nation, and we're putting our foot down. You can't do this to us anymore. In the past, federal government steamrolled through us and did everything that they wanted to do without giving us an opportunity to have any consent or consultation.
The Dakota Access Pipeline stretches for nearly 1,200 miles, completely buried underground. The Dallas-based pipeline company, Energy Transfer Partners, says it's a nearly $4 billion project. The company declined Inside Energy's request to be interviewed, but it has argued that the pipeline is the best way to move crude oil from the Bakken region of North Dakota to market. Last month, Energy Transfer Partners posted this video on YouTube explaining the project's merits.
Pipelines are the safest, environmentally cleanest, and least expensive way to transport the fuel that our communities need.
We can look at this pipeline and say that it puts our water at risk. We can also take a look at what it puts at risk. It puts our sacred sites at risk.
The controversy has centered on the only incomplete section of the pipeline. Energy Transfer Partners says there is 1,094 feet left to build, a stretch that's around 3 football fields long that crosses under the Missouri River just north of the reservation.
It's not if it will break, it's a matter of when it will break and where it's going to break. And if it breaks under this river, it puts us at risk.
I would counter that the pipeline safety record in this country for crude oil pipelines is incredibly strong.
The U.S. produces billions of barrels of crude oil a year. Much of it travels through a vast pipeline network that's tens of thousands of miles long.
We've had very few issues with natural gas, crude oil, and other kinds of pipeline infrastructure in the United States. It is a very high-risk, low-probability scenario in this country for a pipeline failing. So you got to put that on the table.
Nearly all of the oil moved by pipeline arrives at its destination safely, but it's the fraction of a percent that's spilled that can have devastating effects.
I'm a North Dakota citizen. I don't want these pipelines spilling into our waters and on our land and ruining our beautiful landscape in North Dakota either.
Beginning in the spring of 2015, the North Dakota Public Service Commission held 3 public hearings on the Dakota Access Pipeline route. None of those hearings were on the Standing Rock Reservation because the pipeline wouldn't actually cross it.
So I had no idea that this was a concern to the Standing Rock members or the tribal council at all.
The state is not the only party that had to sign off on the pipeline. The federal government, in this case the Army Corps of Engineers, was also charged with permitting certain sections and consulting with the tribe.
Consultation, as we understand it in federal law, doesn't say tribes can block every project. What it says is that they have a seat at the table as a government to express their point of view, and that you can't ignore that.
Every time we called and every time we talked to the Corps of Engineers, we said, this is not consultation and we don't agree with this pipeline. Can we take a step back and start over? And the Corps of Engineers says, well, we called them, we emailed them, we called Chairman Archambault's office. Every time we didn't agree with what they were doing, but that's not heard. So we don't get listened to, we don't get heard. Check off the box, we talk to the tribe.
The Dakota Access Pipeline is not the first controversial piece of infrastructure to cross this land. In the mid-20th century, the Army Corps of Engineers created dams up and down the Missouri River as part of a large flood control and hydropower project.
Here in this state, there is being built the largest dam of its kind in the world. It is a source of pleasure to me, as president, therefore, to come here on this occasion.
Villages were flooded, including an area where many Standing Rock Sioux had made their homes. This dam created Lake Oahe, flooding over 50,000 acres on the reservation in both North Dakota and South Dakota, driving families out. President Obama visited Standing Rock in 2014. It was his first visit to a reservation as president, and it was the first time any sitting U.S. president had visited the reservation.
To build more economic opportunity in Indian country, because every American, including every Native American, deserves a chance to work hard and get ahead.
Following President Obama's 2014 visit, the Dakota Access Pipeline protests grew and energized the Standing Rock Sioux. After the Army Corps announced last July that most of the Dakota Access Pipeline route had been approved, the tribe filed suit in federal court in Washington, D.C., claiming the consultation process was fundamentally flawed. The tribe also argued the pipeline's impact on historic properties was not properly considered in the permitting process. Federal law requires that, even if the affected property falls outside reservation boundaries. The Army Corps disputed the tribe's claim. Last September, the U.S. District Judge James Boasberg ruled on the tribe's request to halt construction. The Standing Rock Sioux lost, but the Obama administration stepped in and put the project on hold.
I think it's unprecedented in terms of energy development in this country that you'd actually have the government's lawyers join in the statement after they lost in court the same day that they go out and say, by the way, we're pausing this project. They didn't convince the judge, so they did something else.
3 months later, as fall turned to winter, the protests continued to grow. Then, the Obama administration blocked the final permit needed to build under the river.
The Corps of Engineers is going to deny the easement.
For the protesters and the tribe, it felt like victory. But it would be short-lived.
This is with respect to the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline.
7 weeks later, on his 5th day in office, President Trump issued an executive memorandum instructing the Army Corps of Engineers to expedite the permitting process. Just last week, by order of North Dakota's governor, protesters left their camps near the pipeline site. Before going, some burned their tents and other structures. Police arrested dozens of protesters that defied the order and forcibly removed them.
Right, so you've done a sheep analysis already, but today you're going to do an even better one. You're going to look at each of the words, minimum 2 sentences. If you need to do some extra research about the Dakota pipeline to fill this out, please do so. I want to know the social and cultural aspects of the Dakota pipeline being built, the historical aspect of it being built. Think this is being built on First Nations land, who were there for thousands of years before European settlers turned up. What are the economic impacts of the Dakota pipeline for different groups? What's going to be the environmental impact, not just of the pipeline, but what is in the pipeline? Black gold. What political ramifications are there? Remember, if you read up about this, you'll find that previous President Obama ceased the building of the pipeline while they waited for environmental impact studies to be built, and then in 2017 when President Trump took over, he said nah, and they finished building it. Spoiler alert. And technological. So what kind of from a technological point of view, how might you be able to apply that concept to the Dakota pipeline? What technology was involved in it? Or whatever you want. Again, do some research if you don't have anything interesting to say about those 6 dot points. It's time for another video. Now, this one has got a couple of swears in it, but I think you're old enough and you can cope. They're just the S words, but it's pretty funny. So there's a media organisation called Juice Media. It's Australian. They do all kinds of things. I highly recommend you check them out. Honest government ads. If you just put that into YouTube, honest government ad, they've got heaps that are just hilarious. And this one is about the Dakota pipeline, and you'll see they are big on sarcasm. Yeah, take it away.
Oil is life, and sometimes you've just got to grab it by the pussy. That's why we've teamed up with Big Oil and Big Banks to bring you the Dakota Access Pipeline. Once completed, it will transport shit tons of fracked crude oil to our refineries, where it will go on to fuel our commitments under the Paris Climate Summit to not give a shit about climate change. Safety is our priority. Accidents with toxic oil-carrying pipes like these only occur, well, like most of the time. So where better to put one than under the majestic Missouri River, where a leak will only poison the water source of millions of people downstream. This glorious pipe dream will also create thousands of local jobs for a few months. The only thing standing between the empire, the government, and total planetary habitat self-destruction is a rebel alliance of native tribes who've come together on the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation to peacefully protect the land and water for future generations. Ew. But don't worry, we're dealing with them in a culturally sensitive way. Enough wasting your taxes to invade countries on the other side of the world to get oil. This, folks, is the original American way, invading Native American lands to get stuff we want. Sure, we signed treaties to protect Sioux ancestral lands and burial sites, but that's never stopped us before. Remember that time we discovered gold in the Black Hills? The Treaty of Fort Laramie sure as heck didn't stop us from getting at it. We even left a thoughtful gift carved into their sacred mountain to say thank you and remind them of us forever. That's the spirit we're keeping alive today with the Dakota Access Pipeline, bringing you double the value by screwing both the past and the future in a single blow. Authorized by the Department of Homeland Invasions and Eco-Settle Pipe Dreams.
Right, for our reflection activity today, write down the words or reflection activity, and your challenge is to summarize this lesson in exactly 12 words, no less, no more. I have faith that you can do it. Fun. That's homework time. Rad. I want you to read those 2 pages from the textbook, as always. Really need you to do that. My summary notes are not the full picture. And as we try to do once a week so that you become the master or mistress of vocabulary, Go to our vocabulary quizlet and spend about 15 minutes on it. By the end of the year, you're going to be all over that. You're going to own those words. They're going to be tattooed on your body. Thanks so much for getting stuck into lesson number 2 of our social movements unit. Keep it real.